Serious, Reddit. What was the scariest place you have ever been to? Reconstructed subway which exploded years ago in Daegu, Korea. They memorialized the explosion on site. Scorched walls, melted people's items, burned phone booths and all, but the scariest was the scorched walls with writings and handprints of the people that were trapped during the explosion. This subway is one of the busiest stations even today due to being the city's downtown area. That sounds horrifying, dude. Probably a cave, wriggling through a lemon drop as they called it, where you go feet first down a skinny butt tunnel and have to wriggle down about 12 feet before you drop into a chamber below. About halfway my shoulders got stuck and it took like 5 excruciating minutes to get loose. I don't know why I went spelunking. I'm claustrophobic. Ever since I read about the guy who got stuck and died because they couldn't get him unstuck, I refuse. I will never wiggle through tiny caves like that. I don't know why the frick this happened, but by the end of it you'll understand when I say my parents aren't known for making the best decisions. So, when I was 9 or 10, my dad took me to this house that had been basically destroyed by fire. I don't remember exactly whether my mother was there or she just okayed this. They were not together, ever. There were other adults involved in this too. I think my uncle and one of my dad's buddies, but I was the only kid. Anyway, we went into this fire-destroyed house to look for crap that could be salvaged. We found very little and really that should have been nothing at all. All I really recall anymore was an 8-track tape that had been warped just enough by the fire to play 2 songs at once in spots. So there's little kid me, after dark, picking my way through this freaking burned house full of debris, and I get into one room and look in what had been the closet and there's this shag rug looking thing there. Which was when my dad helpfully told me that the daughter of the house had run back inside the fire to try to save the family dog, and died in the closet with her arms wrapped around the animal, and that wasn't a rug but the remains of the dog's body. And then I was encouraged to look through this dead kid's toys to see if anything was in good enough condition for me to take home. I've been afraid of dying in a fire ever since. Hey, quick question, what the frick? An abandoned set of buildings that were part of a former college campus, next to an abandoned military airfield. There was a lot to explore, but it definitely gave off an unsettling vibe. There was even an enterable hangar that had a bunch of torn gas masks lying on a pile in the middle of it. The masks were probably purposefully destroyed to prevent their use. Masks wear out, especially when left unattended in an abandoned facility. Got stuck in my car in a freezing step during a really bad snowstorm at -45°C. The snow was real deep and my car was stuck so badly it would take a truck to pull it out. Cell phone didn't work. Maps didn't work. For those who don't know, once the engine dies you have about 12 hours before you freeze to death. The worst thing is that the snow was so deep and the storm was so bad they probably wouldn't have found me until spring. I have been in a bunch of life-threatening situations in my lifetime, but frick, nothing is as scary as freezing to death in the middle of nowhere. Thankfully, another guy saw me. He happened to be driving a real pumped up Land Cruiser, all geared up and crap. He gave me a real confused look once he realized I was driving a Jaguar XE. Probably the last freaking car you want to drive there. It would have been okay if I stayed on the road, I guess, but I couldn't see because of the storm and wandered about 50 meters off road. He pulled me out and led me for 2 hours at 40 kilometers an hour, given he could easily do 120 thanks to his car. I had just crossed over the border into China from Kazakhstan. For some reason, my buddy and I made it a plan to hit as many haunted houses as we could. For whatever reason, there were plenty on our route from Moscow to Delhi. We found out about one in Urumqi and decided to go. As we went down these dank stairs into what seemed like once was part of an underground system, everything just felt wrong. The person they had us sit in these gross chairs in front of this odd raised platform. Out of nowhere, this girl, and I mean no more than 14, comes out in a skimpy leopard print outfit with a snake. We are getting Getfo vibes but are the only ones there and the dude running the place right behind us. So, we proceed to watch this girl pop the snake's head into her mouth and swing it around like a helicopter. After the show they tried to guide us to these rooms with the grossest mattresses on the planet on the ground. It was really sad, creepy, and disgusting. All we could do is shove some RMB in the guy's hand and run out. I hope the girl is okay. I went to a special needs school until I was 11 and me and a group of mates all with various disabilities were sent away on a separate scheme from the school. The scheme was organized and run by young Christian Catholic medical students. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with Christian and Catholic people in general, but these people were wrong on more levels than you can imagine. There were at least 5 other special needs schools there on the scheme. All the other children also had various disabilities and needs. They used the week to use us kids in experimental treatments and examinations, in between taking us on field trips and enforced religious services and activities. Regardless of our religion, they force-fed my best mate meat, even though it said on her permission form that being Pakistani she was a strict vegetarian. Dislocated my other mate's hip by throwing him playfully in the air, and didn't brush my hair for the entire week. At night you couldn't sleep for the drunken whopping and loud grunts of pleasure from said medical students. You were also quite fearful of certain male members coming to check on you in the middle of the night too, and we came up with a keep safe solution when it happened. This all resulted in us having enough and planning a prison break where me and an able-bodied mate done a runner from the mansion. We didn't get far though, not surprising as we were both only 10 years old and my mate who was pushing my wheelchair was autistic. We got as far as the gates at the bottom of the hill before we were rounded up and carted back in the van. We were both reprimanded severely and banned from going out for one day, but the rest of our mates thought we were here, so that was good. When we got home, we all told our parents about the awful week and the school were informed. The school already knew about our friend with a dislocated hip, as he had to stay in hospital overnight when it happened. So they weren't too happy with the scheme anyway. The school never used the scheme again after that year. If I heard my kid tell me that, I would raise the unholiest heck down on them that I could possibly raise. I spent 2 weeks alone at an abandoned silk factory and nuclear waste cleanup site in a small rural town. No electricity. It was 120 years old. Roofs collapsing. It was creepy. Dark. Wet. Strange noises. One corner of an upper floor was walled off with plastic sheeting. Work elites and a table. Never did figure out what was going on there. There was a eyeball scrawled on the wall in another area in red marker with the words "It sheds the blood here" underneath. The building is gone now. My brother went to visit my uncle in Papua New Guinea. He stayed the night in Port Moresby, one of the most dangerous cities in the world. His escort was a friend of my uncle's, an Australian federal police officer, that's FBI equivalent, and the hotel had armed guards at the gate, the front door, the desk and hallway to his room. From memory, the room was also protected, solid doors and stuff, with a panic room and an escape route, should the main room be breached. So yeah, I'd say that would be a mite scary. I'm an over-the-road truck driver. I've been to crappy cities all too often, and it still makes me freak just a bit, lol. Although I know what to do if someone tries to rob me. Just get out the truck and hand over the keys. This crap ain't worth my life. I thought you were gonna say step on the fricking gas. You saw what happened to Reginald Denny when he got out of his truck. Last year I lived in a suburb in Gifu Prefecture. Down the street was a broken down old house and my friend and I decided to do a photo shoot there one night, because an old broken Japanese house looked pretty cool. When I say broken down, I mean entire walls were missing and exposing the inside. Floors were broken, and lots of old junk everywhere. Pipes and beams were exposed, and there were crates of old belongings. There was one crate though that had hundreds of photos of the same girl, as a child to adulthood. Black and white, developed from film. It was always just her and no one else in the photo. I thought it was strange that the old owners could just leave photos of this girl behind. The more I looked at them, I noticed she didn't seem happy in a lot of them. I got really uncomfortable and so my friend and I left and abandoned the photo shoot. I think she might have been a victim of something and that's why the photos were left behind in a half-destroyed house. Got really freaked out that night. Some hotel Atlanta. My mom and I were traveling to rescue my brother from an abusive situation and she picked a cheap hotel outside the city. It was clear the type of people who came there but figured it wasn't a problem. As we got to sleep someone started banging on the door screaming how we owed them money. My mom called front desk for security who came and removed that guy. The rest of the night we saw shadows come back and forth outside the window and they would just be standing there. Eventually at 4 in the morning the banging came back. My mom called security and had them escort us to our truck because she refused to deal with it any longer. Dang. Finally a parent in this thread who knows what's up. Catacombs in Sicily. Yup, great parenting. Let's bring a 6-year-old to a place where every light shines on a dead body and everything else is darkness. I was 4 when my parents took me. I just remember so many skulls. We were on our way to Flagstaff, AZ for the Overland Expo and planned to camp near there the night before it started since we were on a longer overland trip. It was this place in the woods that was recommended by others who were there before. It all seemed fine and we set up camp. At night when we brushed our teeth we noticed there were animal skulls hanging in the trees all around us. It was super scary. We packed up and spent the night in a hotel. I was doing some intense solo off-trail hiking in the eastern Sierras and found an old mine entrance. Being a teenager I immediately walked in there. Shortly thereafter, I started getting lightheaded and ran back out. I could have easily passed out and died, and, given the extremely remote location, remained unfound for years. Should leave a sign there that says to not enter. The old graveyard of Olagues in the Hérault, France. I was camping in the neighborhood and we visited the village, old and beautiful. We were young and inquisitive and climbed the wall around an old graveyard. What we found were 19th century graves, often in little grave houses. But grave robbers had yanked the lead coffins out of the houses and everywhere were opened coffins with skeletons. It was actually very sad to behold. There were 5 of us and without a warning we all ran to the wall and jumped back to the world of the living. We all had a feeling we should not stay there a second longer. We could not explain it. Just an overwhelming feeling of terror. About 15 years later I passed that cemetery on the back of a motorbike and just looked through a crack in the wall. I was struck with that same feeling. It is not a good place. I got abandoned in a care home at 11 years old in a foreign country. That crap was scary. My parents spent a lot of time in war zones for their careers and had strange ideas about what made a good family holiday. So, anyway, we ended up going to Egypt and Libya in 2011. If you don't know, this was the year of the Cairo riots, Egyptian revolution and the Libyan civil war. I was 15. Really made me see the world differently, in multiple ways. Saw lots of scary people with guns, but also slept out under the stars in the Libyan desert and saw night sky with zero light pollution. Nothing can prepare you for the sheer brightness of the stars when everything else around you is pitch black. That also changed me, made me understand how insignificant and tiny we really are. Also got to see the pyramids at a time that had no other tourists. Whole place was totally abandoned. But that's irrelevant to the question I guess. Overall was an 8/10 holiday. Probably won't take any of my potential future kids into a war zone though. I wouldn't recommend. What the frick were the rebels soldiers even thinking? Some random family going on vacation to their war-torn land. An Airbnb in Barcelona. I've spent quite a while in Spain, speak Spanish, and have visited Barcelona multiple times. I've also used Airbnb multiple times and know what to check for. 2 friends and I, all 20 SF, picked an Airbnb with several favorable ratings in a good neighborhood. One of the ones that's a room in someone's apartment. Show up and the 2 guys look nothing like the picture but are very hospitable. So we went inside. They showed us around and the apartment looked like the photos. Then they showed us the room and let us be. We opened the door to the room and it's nothing like the photos. It's essentially a closet, 3 dirty twin mattresses on the floor with no pillows and blankets covered in old food. Furthermore, the door to the room has no interior lock on it, but it did have an exterior lock. It's at this point that we also realized they never gave us a key to the apartment. We took pictures of everything and waited until we heard them leave the apartment and watched them from the window until they were out of sight. We gathered our packs and sprinted out of there, with no plans on where to go, just calling random hostels until we found one that had room. But it was on the other side of the city, and the metro had closed for the night, so we walked an hour and a half. Thankfully the hostel was lovely, and Airbnb refunded us and removed the listing, but we're convinced it was a human trafficking setup. That definitely sounds like it. I'm glad you guys got out of there. A small gas station on the outskirts of El Paso. It was winter. I was 19 or 20. I remember people had mentioned random violence in the area, but I needed gas in my car. I stopped at a station to fill up. It's cold, so I wore my jacket. As in filling up, 3 guys start walking my way. I saw them from my peripheral and kept a watch on them but didn't make it obvious. They approached the car, one standing on the opposite side and the other 2 each going on a separate side. I stopped pumping fuel and casually said what's up, to which they asked if they could have some cash for food. I told them I didn't have any cash on me. I remember one of them saying I said, in an aggressive tone, and they started coming closer. I stepped back, unzipped my jacket and stuck my hand on my side, inside the jacket and said I don't know what you want, but I don't have it and this isn't going to be worth it. They looked at each other and there was a palpable tenseness in the air, but they eventually went across the street and left. To this day I'm convinced by the entire thing and how it felt I was close to being jumped and or carjacked. I'm glad they thought I was armed, because I didn't have crap inside my pocket but a pack of cigarettes and a Sears Tower Zippo lighter. Sears Tower Zippo lighter, and a gasoline dispenser in your hand. I was in a small town in Laos high on magic mushrooms when the power went off in the full town. Local street dogs took the opportunity to fight it out. It was freaking terrifying. Pennington Hollow. Holla to the locals. In Ashe County, North Carolina. I don't know if it's still this way today, but back in the 90s everyone who lived there was named Pennington and you didn't go there unless your name was Pennington. The cops didn't even go there. Think the movie Deliverance. There was a whole classroom in my high school for the special Pennington kids. I once accidentally drove my little 49cc scooter into Pennington Hollow when exploring random back roads. Once I realized where I was, I turned off my engine and went into bicycle mode and noped the frick out of there. I've been to Mexico a couple times for business trips. Majority of the time it's awesome, but I've been in some dangerous situations. We usually have someone who worked for us waiting at the airport to transport us anywhere for the weekend since I didn't speak much Spanish and didn't know my way. It was late at night and we just left one of our resorts. After maybe 20 minutes of driving I was told to hide my face by the driver. It felt like something from a movie. All he told me was to not show I was American. I'm pretty sure cartels camp out near where we went and wait to find someone American since they're most vulnerable. To this day I have no idea if he was freaking with me, but it was one of the scariest moments ever. He was probably not freaking with you. Kidnappings are a real danger over there. Russia. Everyone I met had minimum 1-2 immediate family members who had either been murdered, committed suicide, or died young in an accident, or were in prison. Once I'd got home, within a month at least 3 of the very close people I'd met, all from one family, had died by different reasons. 1. Picking mushrooms. Died alone in the forest. 2. Died alone in apartment. No reason. 3. Died from tuberculosis. Doubt it. She was 7 mo pregnant when I'd seen her. Bad partner. Super depressed. My guess. Suicide or intimate partner violence. Freaking scary place. I kinda had a crush on a kid from Russia in middle school. We were like 12. I asked him how our school was different than his Russia. He said there were a lot of kids who would OD in the stairwells of H. A lot of stabbings. Zugspitze. Highest mountain in Germany. It was gorgeous. It became terrifying when my older brother said, I could push you off and no one would know it was me. And I couldn't tell then, or to this day over 35 years later, whether he was kidding. I had a shop ceramics studio in a hospital morgue from the 1920s. It was rented out as anything goes space, but you're not officially a proper tenant kinda thing. There were dark underground halls with low hanging pipes to all sorts of crazy busted down rooms. Also a dank mustiness that wouldn't go away. It was haunted upstairs and that ghost teams would investigate all the time. However, some funny stuff happened while you were alone in the space basement. That is, if you disturbed things like long shut access panels, they would reopen on their own. If you stayed at a certain hour around 2-4 am you would get a sense of dread. Oh, and the property manager would absolutely refuse to set foot in the basement of the place. Another screwy thing that was scary from a lack of maintenance. I flicked the elevator switch for the overhead fan and it caught fire while it was moving. Place could literally be a death trap. aside from the pile of lead and black mold in our space. Ghosts. Oh, please call an electrician, you're in danger. Not from us. We've been phasing through the walls for years so we can tell it's bar and we ring. My experience was more about the circumstances than the place. I went to a university that offered volunteer opportunities that included cheap international trips. I was on a trip with 20 other clueless Midwestern teens traveling to a school in the mountains of Bolivia. The road was a sheer cliff face on one side and a step drop off on the other. And of course, there were crosses along the roadside marking where vehicles had gone over the side. This was just nerve-wracking until the driver stopped the bus for what we thought was just taking a break. Then he scooted under the front wheels of the bus, came out, rooted around in a box and found a wire coat hanger, scooted back under the bus with the coat hanger and came out without it. Then, vamonos. Our nervousness turns to concern. At the next stop a woman gets on as we are leaving and drapes her arm over the driver's shoulder and they proceed to semi-make out while he is driving. Several of us were white-knuckled at this point. When it gets dark the driver and his girl light up and we smell weed. So now we got a stoned driver getting a hand job in a bus held together by a coat hanger cruising around these hairpin turns in the dark. Good thing it was a Christian college and we all knew the words to Nearer My God to Thee. Reminds me of my dad's experience taking the bus between towns in Mexico. Similar switchback mountain roads and careless driver. At points he could look out the window and see over the edge where hundreds of feet below there were the carcasses of burned out buses. A trucker's motel in Sumatra. After university I decided to get to know myself better and traveled SE Asia for nearly a year on my own. I was on a low budget so mostly hitchhiked around. Had a few adventures here and there. I felt pretty unstoppable near the end of my trip, although I was wondering what I would be really afraid of. Hitchhiking north in Sumatra, I got into a truck with a kind of typical strong big trucker dude. He didn't speak much English but seemed friendly. At last we had come to the end of the road. I was planning to ferry to Malaysia from there, and through sign language I asked the guy if he knew a place to sleep. He nodded and he ended up taking me to some local restaurant where he offered me food. There were a few locals, small guys, there and all seemed to know the trucker. The thing was that most of these local dudes in the restaurant were clearly gay. They were chatting with the trucker, laughing and looking at me in certain funny ways. At this point I started to worry a bit where I might be ending up. Instead of taking me to some sort of hostel, the trucker took me to one of the dirtiest rundown motel places I'd been in my entire trip. I did see a few crappy places before. I really don't wanna know what happens there usually. There's kind of a living room. He takes me to the back where there's another smaller room and I see only one double bed. From there, there's a door that leads to a washing room and he signs to me to go wash myself. I tell him I'm fine and I'll just go straight to bed but he insists. Now I'm just so run down with fear of what the rest of the night will bring. I'm starting to make up all kinds of stories in my head. After quickly washing myself, I get into bed, expecting that the guy would be joining me at any point and thinking how I'd react when he might try to make a move. That moment never came and when I woke up, I found that guy sleeping on the stone floor in the other room. I felt a bit embarrassed and didn't want to wake him so I tried sneaking out. Of course the outside door made a sound when I tried to close it and the guy woke up and came to me. I could see the disappointment in his eyes that I tried sneaking away. I'm still pretty ashamed of how I disgraced his hospitality in that way. Egypt. I was 16 and blonde. The tour company made me have my own armed guard with me at all times. Men kept trying to hold my hand. One tour guy held me hand in the pyramids and tried to take me into rooms nobody else was allowed in. Twice I was told upon entering a museum that my body needed to be searched. Nobody else was told this. My guard would start yelling and ushering me away. Very heavy moments to wrap my head around at that age. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.